Good afternoon, everyone. We are excited to welcome everyone to today's event, Community Conversations, a look inside ASU Gammage. Before we get started, we wanted to remind you that you are in a Zoom webinar. No cameras are needed. Please share your questions with everyone in the Q&A. Someone might have the same question. We will take questions at the end of the session, and you will have the opportunity to submit questions in the post-event survey. Thank you for coming, and I will now pass the presentation to Colleen Ross, our Performing Arts Librarian, for our welcome and to share our ASU Indigenous Land Statement. Welcome, Colleen.
All right, good afternoon and welcome. I'm Colleen Ross, Performing Arts Librarian, and I am honored to introduce this community conversation. The ASU Library acknowledges the 23 Native nations that have inhabited this land for centuries. Arizona State University's 4 campuses are located in the Salt River Valley on the ancestral territories of Indigenous peoples, including the Accomal O'odham and Peeposh Indian communities, whose care and keeping of these lands enables us to be here today. ASU Library acknowledges the sovereignty of these nations and seeks to foster an environment of success and possibility for all Native American learners and knowledge seekers. We are advocates for the incorporation of Indigenous knowledge systems and research methodologies within contemporary library practice. ASU Library welcomes members of the Accomal O'odham, Peeposh, and all Native nations to the library. ASU Library would like to extend a welcome to all scholars, learners, and community members. And now, I would like to introduce our panelists. Colleen Jennings-Roggensack, arts leader and visionary, is ASU Vice President for Cultural Affairs and Executive Director of Gammage. Colleen established the ASU Gammage organizational mission of connecting communities, which allows ASU Gammage to go beyond its doors to make a difference in the community through the shared vision of the arts. Is Arizona's only Tony Awards voter and vice chair of the Road for the Broadway League Board of Governors, Colleen has made a lasting impact on the Valley and nationally through arts advocacy. Shannon Walker is ASU's university archivist. She collects, organizes, preserves, and makes accessible materials that document the history of Arizona State University. Shannon is committed to cultivating and maintaining relationships within departments on campus, as well as with students, faculty, alumni, and the broader ASU community. She's continually looking for opportunities to promote collections and services. Shannon received her MLIS from the University of Denver and has a dual degree in history and anthropology from the University of Colorado Boulder. Welcome to our conversation.
Thank you, Colleen. Let me just get our presentation started here. All right, thank you for that introduction, Colleen. I appreciate it. Good afternoon, everyone. Colleen, thank you so much for being a part of our community conversation today. We're excited to connect with you. We are here to celebrate ASU Gammage Auditorium. I know that we are all fans. That's pretty much everyone here. Yes. And we want to also just acknowledge its long legacy as a landmark, not just on campus, but for Arizonans and those who visit the state. It's a place to come. It's a destination. Before we get started, I want to acknowledge that all the images in this visual presentation come from University Archives collections. As Caitlin alluded to, the goal of University Archives is to collect materials that document the history of the school. We organize these materials, we make them available for research, and we preserve them for future generations. Before we dive into our questions, I thought it might be helpful to start with a brief introduction to the history of Gammage for those who may or may not know much about it. Here is a picture of Gammage in 2007. I love this picture. It sort of got that nice 2007 color to it. But the building itself is named for Grady Gammage, who was the 9th president of ASU. It is a Frank Lloyd Wright designed building based on plans that he had originally drawn up for an opera house in Baghdad, Iraq. That project never came to fruition. To our benefit, he was able to use that to create what we now see today. Grady Gammage sought out Frank Lloyd Wright to design the auditorium for the university. The architect visited the campus in May of 1957, and together they identified the location of the new auditorium building in the southwest corner of the ASU Tempe campus. Unfortunately, both men passed away in 1959, Frank Lloyd Wright in April and Grady Gammage in December. However, their vision, their passion was not lost, and planning for the buildings continued. William Wesley Peters, one of the Taliesin West architects, assumed chief architect duties for the project based on Frank Lloyd Wright's plans and discussions with university leadership. In May of 1962, a groundbreaking ceremony was held on the site, attended by Mrs. Grady Gammage Jr., and ASU President G. Homer Durham, among other people. Construction of the building began in May of 1962. Here are some photos of that construction and the construction site itself. It's kind of hard to fathom and to believe that there was nothing out there to begin with, and then we see something kind of come about. These are inside views of the auditorium during construction. So construction was complete in June of 1964. But here's where I'd love to get your perspective, Colleen.
Okay.
As I'm doing research on this, I found out that during planning, construction, and even after the opening, that the building was, on one hand, highly praised. On the other hand, it was highly criticized and described as a monstrosity or a waste of state funding. Other colorful terms were used to describe the building, as you can see in some of these articles we pull from the archives.
Yes.
So can you speak to why there might have been such a high level of criticism and speculation for the building?
It's hard to imagine today, but this beautiful, iconic building cost $2.46 million. Nearly $2.5 million. And for that time period, that was a lot of money. If we had to redo this building today, I was just visiting the Perlman Center in New York, and that was a $900 million building. We would not be able to build this building. So I think that finances played a role in it. Now, I like to think, while Mr. Wright said, look, I have this building. He and President Gammage walked the grounds, and Mr. Wright put his cane down and said, here, I will build a building with outstretched arms that says, welcome to Arizona. Case in point, as you have said, Shannon, he had the plans in his pocket because King Faisal II had commissioned this work, and then King Faisal was deposed. He was murdered, and Mr. Wright was left with those plans. However, the desert is a desert, so Baghdad, Tempe, we're in the desert, and I think the building looks amazing given the landscape that we're in. But at the time, those grounds were the women's athletic fields. So I thought it was pretty interesting that they could easily give up the women's athletic fields, because I don't know where they went. But I do think that it was a shocking building. It was also a round building. The lobby was southern facing. So there are people going, why would you build an all glass southern facing lobby in the desert? And the arms that stretched out, they were originally designed to go across pools of water. It was going to be on an island and go across pools of water. And Mr. Wright, I don't know if we have another, we could go back to the picture that shows the 1972 one. He wanted to keep the feel of it as being a large tent. So if it was like a Bedouin tent, and the arches you see there with the lights on it, Mr. Wright referred to that as those were elephants marching inside the tent. It's actually one of my favorite architectural conventions about this building, because when you are inside Gammage, those elephants march all the way inside. So the outside comes inside, which is quite extraordinary. But at the time, it was radical. And you didn't have any pictures of the outside of what it looked street facing, but there were small bungalows around ASU. So there wasn't anything of this magnitude there. So that's why people are like, oh my goodness, it has, changed the landscape. But now looking back on it, it has become an iconic image, not just for Arizona State University, not just for the Valley, but it is used as an iconic image of Arizona. So I think that was another thing. The other thing is when the building went up, we ran out of money. $2.46 million did not go as far as they thought it would be, because this was to have been a grand opera house. And in opera houses, you have to have a stage that's the same size of the stage that's there for the audience, as well as a stage in the back. And so we weren't able to do that. So that stage was removed. And then the thought too is that it wasn't just for, and it remains so, not just for the stage and audiences, but there is a side of the curve that includes classroom spaces. We house the gamelan, the violin workshop, taking care of stringed instruments is there. Several faculty members have offices in there. We have a large laundry room that we do things like Hamilton, which is in my background, where they do laundry 24 hours a day while the show is running, just to keep costumes and things. So we have an orchestral rehearsal room, and we have a choral rehearsal room as well. So there are a lot of things in that building, and I think people just thought it might have been perceived as frivolous at the time, but President Gammage was forward thinking, just as we continue to be, our 9th year of innovation, forward thinking as a university. And so I think it was just a surprise for people. And for many, many years, there wasn't a symphony hall in downtown Phoenix. There wasn't, now there, like every community has, there wasn't a Mesa Performing Arts Center. There wasn't a Tempe Performing Arts Center. There wasn't a, Chandler Performing Arts Center. So no one had anything. And so this was the first. This was sort of the beacon that said, we are a cultural wellspring, not a cultural desert.
Right. Yeah, great points. Those are wonderful to think about what they had around them at that time, and how radical this was for them.
And one thing I would say that's also radical, and people may not realize it, is the grass you see behind me and the curve. It's actually called the Gammage curve. It is part of the architecture. So Mr. Wright wanted this sort of water-like feel to it with the grass, and when we flood it, it looks like there's water in front of it, but that curve around it was to mimic the curve of the building. Mr. Wright didn't believe in corners and squares. It was actually built on a 16th scale, note scale, and you'll see it's completely round, and how things are positioned there. So I just think there's a lot of historic. The building itself is historic. The curve is historic. So the grass is historic. It will be there. There was also a design, which you may or may not have, I believe we have, where there would have been a smaller playhouse built underneath. And then again, the money ran out. So we didn't have that smaller playhouse. We do have the Galvin Playhouse across the street now.
Right.
But I also think Antoine Predock, who designed the Nelson Fine Arts Center and the museum, really paid homage to Mr. Wright and this desert building. For people who may not know, when you stand in front of the ASU Art Museum, it is a contemporized version of the Sphinx. And so I feel like we have a lock on desert architecture in that corner of the campus.
Yeah, there's just so much more than what meets the eye when you
Yes.
think about these buildings and things. I love to hear about the many layers to them. So So of course, when the building opened, they held a convocation ceremony, a dedication to the building. We have some of the original invitations here. We also have online, we have audio recordings of this convocation, which are amazing to listen to. I know most people might think that it's boring. To me, they're fascinating.
Yes.
There's some incredible speeches. Here are some images from that day, but there were some very important speakers there. Of course, ASU President G. Homer Durham,
Yes.
the governor at the time, Paul Fannin. Also, Mrs. Frank Lloyd Wright, Olga Vanna Wright, spoke on behalf of the Frank Lloyd Wright Foundation. The chief architect, of course, William Wesley Peters, was there, and Mrs. Grady Gammage also gave a response to all of these. And you can see in all of their speeches, they're very heartfelt and very devoted to the original design or the original intention, the vision that Grady Gammage and Frank Lloyd Wright had for these buildings. So we'll provide a link to those audio recordings that you can listen to in spare time, but they're fascinating.
And may I just pause for a moment here?
Yep.
In the center photograph, you will see that the orchestral shell is extended. So everyone is seated inside that 80-ton orchestral shell.
Wow.
And so we begin to talk about how Gammage has evolved and changed. One of the big changes was that shell. We still have that shell today, but it was not only 80 tons, but it was planted with about 12 to 20 usable feet behind it.
Wow.
And so one of the things, probably President Crow will always ask me, what do you think is going to be written on your tombstone when you leave? And I said, well, Gammage looked exactly the same until I came in 1992.
Wow.
And so every major change to this building happened during my tenure. And one of them was that orchestral shell, because the world changed. And while we never really did as much opera, although I must say we have a brand new opera opening November 4th, based on Hemingway's The Old Man and the Sea. And so I'm very excited about that. Paolo Prestini is the composer, and 5 of our graduate students are actually singing in it. And it's a big international opera, but it was used primarily for orchestras. And so there used to be lots and lots of orchestras touring and lots of orchestras playing here. Well, that isn't the case anymore. You know, taste changed, people changed. And while we still do orchestras on occasion, we don't do lots and lots of orchestras. But what we do is lots and lots of Broadway. And so one of the things we discovered when I came in and we were bringing in Phantom of the Opera is that that space could not accommodate these bigger shows that were coming in. So we had to figure out how to move that orchestral shell. And to say that Gammage belongs to everyone, it belonged to every musician in the world. And at the time, Carnegie Hall had gone through a renovation, and it actually ruined the sound in Carnegie Hall. So musicians wrote me from all over the world, not necessarily in a nice manner, but saying, please don't ruin the sound. Because I said, what I think we can do is move the shell. And that was like one of the first major changes. And we worked with the engineers at NASA, and we worked with a theater consultant out of Boston, and we re-engaged Kierkegaard, who is the original acoustician for it, and determined that we could move that shell like the space shuttle gets moved on a series of rails that the air bladder comes and lifts it up, and it moves it stage left outdoors, where we now have a beautiful Schubert wall, which shows all of the shows. Okay, that was not there. And I can remember having many discussions about that and what's it going to be and why would that happen? And yet it is still one of the most beloved theaters in the
Mhm.
Valley, in the Southwest, and international, and the sound remained very good. But that was just one of several changes. And I think Mr. Wright was like laughing because if you've ever read any of his biographies, he always said he built buildings to last 50 years and then they should fall down. Thank you, Mr. Wright. But we didn't have $900,000 to rebuild another building. So we said, nope, we're going to keep this one alive and vibrant and make that happen.
Well, and I appreciate the efforts to obviously innovate for practical purposes and also, but to keep the historical integrity of the
Yes.
building.
Yes. And as people come into the building, so the shell is still there, which is wonderful. And we can move it in and move it out and do a number of other things. But we also kept these little moments that are historical. There used to be phone booths. Does everybody remember that? Before we all had our own cell phones. And there are several places where these beautiful wooden phone booths and platforms, which we didn't take out, we kept. And my long-term goal is to put inside of them digital screens, which will play the history.
Yeah.
So that's one of those things. I would say the other thing we kept is when you come to the box office lobby, you'll see the way the box office has these round shapes which mimic the building, the colonnades on the building, and that stayed the same, except we lowered one for accessibility reasons, but we stayed true to that. I must admit, I was quite surprised to come to the box office and see we were selling lots of tickets to, I've forgotten which rock star that was in the building. And and this was before a lot of credit cards. So the money was just out. And I said, wow, yeah, is this a really good idea? I mean, I don't know. We've always done it this way. So we've actually taken some of the screening that Mr. Wright designed, which you can see mimicked in the orchestral shell, where we have the Ailior Skinner organ, which has 3,050 pipes in it. And so that we put out in front, so that it created a little bit of a guard and a safety measure for our box office staff, and for what was then a lot of monies. Now almost everything is credit and it's done online.
Right.
But at the time that was considered radical. But we've kept that, and we've kept some of the framed interiors where we show the one sheets of what's coming. That was original to the building. And then one of the things we didn't keep was Mr. Wright, and I think also designing this for Baghdad. Number one, a lot of women didn't go out in public. So we had 41 toilets for men and 24 for women. In a theater, in the house, we call it inside the house, which seats 3,017 seats. And today, the majority of theater goers are women. So many of you, it's one of the things President Crow said, you will be remembered for those bathrooms. Because the other thing is that all of our finances and our resources and our budget, we are financially independent. So we don't receive monies from the university. And that includes making changes to this building. So the bathrooms themselves, this was a little under $2 million for the orchestral move. Then there were no ramps going up. So it was completely inaccessible. It was stairs all the way across, where you now see the ramp that gets you to the lobby. And so when I went to my first production, which was Evita, anyone who had any accessibility issues at all had to sit in the very back of the orchestra, in the back wall. That was it. And I said, well, that can't be. And it also can't be right in terms of our commitment to accessibility.
Right.
And so we put those ramps in so people could get there. And then we put the first little elevator in, which is house left if you're sitting in the house, or stage right, which you go in through the sunset lobby, which is opposite the box office, and it'll take you to that level. And then we pulled out all the seats in the first 3 rows and then put plugs in so that people could come in and sit in the front rows and not have to sit in the back. So that ramp was, those two ramps on either side were changes. So we just limited the staircase. The other ramp that went up to the grand tier, those were always there, but they're not ADA grade.
Mm.
So one of the things we talked about, in addition to needing more restrooms, was that we actually were a 5-story building with no elevators.
Wow.
I mean, we would never think about doing that today.
Right.
And so one of the things, I will always thank the Kemper and Ethel Marley Foundation for saying to us, we will jumpstart your campaign for it was called Elevate and Alleviate, for the bathrooms and the elevators, if you will find a solution. Don't come to us with a patch meal. And so we met with so many different architects and discovered what we really needed to do. And that solution was a $9.6 million solution.
Wow.
So Kemper and Ethel Marley Foundation jump-started us with $3 million, and then we privately raised the rest. And many of you who are on listening, I want to say thank you, because your contribution made a difference. And so we were not only able to put in 118 women stalls, 118, but we were also able to put in the elevators. So people could get to the grand tier. They could get to the promenade, which we have made into a place where people could come and eat, have a beverage, and enjoy that space out there. We've even hosted dinners. Stephen Hawking's, the famous physicist, we had 2 dinners for him up there, and he could come up and, you know, and get in. And so there were those changes that just made the building more welcoming for people.
Right.
We did keep in the round water faucets. If you'll see those, they're curved into the wall. They're kind of sculpted into the wall, and they're round. However, there's very little pressure. So sometimes the water kind of trickles out, but we put in, again, keeping up with the times and being innovative, 2 fountains as you come in through the box office and through the grand tier, where you can actually fill up a water bottle.
Oh, yeah.
So that, you know, again, to make this sustainable.
Right. Absolutely.
Place as well.
Yeah.
So, I know you thought you would never get off these pictures. So
No. I love that you elaborate. These pictures actually are some of the only pictures we have of the dedication ceremony. And I was happy to find them because they hadn't been digitized up to this point. So we'll talk a little bit about opening night, probably very exciting for everyone. I love how they dressed too.
Isn't it fantastic? I mean, it's such it marks the period in the time, along with the cars around the fountains.
Exactly.
It marks the time. And that's why you always take a picture of a car around the fountain.
Exactly, yeah. And again, these are some early photos.
Yes.
I love the
if
color.
you go back one
Sure.
back again.
Yeah.
So you see that curve where that ramp goes up was there. But if you'll notice, it was straight staircase all the way across.
Yeah.
And now part of it is the ramp that I was talking about.
Okay. And again, these beautiful color images.
It's beautiful. And I'll say something else that we made differently. The windows, again, the southern facing exposure, there used to be curtains that hung down, and those curtains would dry rot from the sun like every 3 months.
Sure.
So we were doing new drapes. And when I came, I said, well, why do we do drapes when we have duets? Like that's to me, a Southwest convention, the duets, and they would fit in the architectural curve, and they go up and they go down and they lower. And you wouldn't believe how many people said, yes, but Mr. Wright said there should be curtains there. And I said, A, Mr. Wright didn't know about duets. And if he did, they would be in there. And B, Mr. Wright's no longer with us.
That's right.
He's not calling from his grave going, why'd you take the curtains down? But the duets look beautiful. And they again mimic one of our 57 shades of terracotta, which are in this building, which I just think is marvelous. Again, mimicking the desert. Exactly. And then on the picture, as you're facing your screen on the right, where all those circles are, that's where the Elio Skinner organ is housed. And so it's And it's still housed in the shell there, and we still use it, so it's great.
Okay. A few more here.
Yes,
You
you
have
can
the
see the
auditorium
orchestra.
empty,
Yes.
auditorium full, yep.
1,600 seats on the main floor, and the seats are adhered to the floor. So when we made the difference in making the first 3 rows accessible, they had to be taken out. But then as shows grew and changed, so The Lion King, which is one of our favorite shows, we actually remove 268 seats every time so that the animal parade can
Right,
happen. And then when the evil animals come down, I just forgotten what they were called.
right. Scar, is that Scar?
Yeah, Scar. No, Scar's a lion, but these
Okay.
are. Oh, my assistant is listening, and she yelled, "They're hyenas."
Hyenas,
So
right?
their hyenas can come down the line. And we actually work with someone who deals with historic theaters to
Okay.
put those seats in.
Wow.
Something else, if you look to the right, what makes Gammage such an amazing building, and people come from all over the world to tour this building. I like them to also come and see shows, but they come and tour the building. But the grand tier and the balcony are not adhered to the back wall,
Right.
which makes it a dynamic and amazing view to look at, but it makes it a horrible place to mix sound. So one of the things we discovered is we moved mixing sound all over the place. A sound mixer on the orchestra. Phantom actually mixes on the grand tier house left. But one of the things we did, and Disney helped us to do this, is we put in motors up in the roof, and we put in curtains, or we call them blacks in the theater, and you can see them on the side when the proscenium is open and where people do exits and entrance from. We hung them back there. We made them the color of that terracotta, and they can raise and lower and change the sound in the space. So instead of the sound hitting the wall and going up and over the grand tier and then hitting the wall again and going up and over the balcony, it goes back and it hits the cloth that's there. So for those of you who come in and you look over the grand tier, or up, better yet, over the balcony, you can see those there. But then we pull them up and we put them up to the ceiling if we need that sort of really vibrant live sound.
Wow.
And that's what our shell does, the orchestral shell, is it pushes the sound out.
Yeah.
And if anyone is on the stage at Gammage and you are even up in the balcony and someone is having a regular conversation or even whispering, you can hear every word.
Wow.
Every single word. It's always amazing to me.
Yeah. For better or worse, right?
For better or worse, you can hear. Yes, I always tell the crew, when you're down there, I'm up here, I can hear you.
Right. So I want to just switch gears a little bit here and talk about programming, right? We found a lot of really interesting programs, kind of advertising the shows that were going on, starting with the very first inaugural season and the very first show of Camelot, which we loved this brochure. It's so beautiful.
It's wonderful. It is just absolutely wonderful. And we actually had Camelot several different times. We had Robert Goulet and Stephen Eady were in it. And so we had a number of folks who started out as Lancelot, and then they came back as the king. So
they aged a little bit.
They aged a little, so they toured it through.
But there are so this building is so unique, right? On campus for so many reasons, but it's one of the only buildings that has just such a platitude of uses, right? It's hosted guest speakers, musicals. These are things I found: musicians, mimes, dancing, exhibits, comedians, cultural events, commencement ceremonies, inaugurations, presidential debates, funeral services, academic competitions, and that's probably not even a complete list. So,
it really is the people's house. Senator Goldwater requested that his going home ceremony was held here. And it was the first time in the history of Arizona that the entire House and Senate got on planes and flew to Arizona to say farewell to our favorite son, Senator Goldwater. And it was beautiful. And we were so packed on the inside that we had screens on the outside. So many people could come and say farewell. And Senator Goldwater was a member of a Native American. He was an adopted member of the Native American tribe. So we had a Native American ceremony. We had a gospel singer. I mean, it was amazing. And pretty much every politician was there.
Wow.
So that was quite an honor to be able to do that. We did the first and only to date presidential debate in the American Southwest, and that was President Bush, and it was Senator Kerry. And again, we had 3,000 members of the international press, which filled that lawn, including Al Jazeera. And it was President Crow's really first big event on the campus.
Oh, wow.
So he was on every major network. And so it's like, welcome, it was a great welcome. And so that was quite extraordinary. I also think it is a place where we discuss the origins, like when Lucy, the beginning of humanity, and Dawn came to bring Lucy to us to have that discussion, to have discussions about what's happening here in the Valley, here in Tempe. It was a place, it still is a place where we naturalize citizens. So people were sworn in. We also had the swearing in of the Arizona Bar. So we swore in a lot of lawyers. Everyone needs lawyers. So there's a lot of lawyers being sworn in. So there are so many things that happen. And now, of course, the Arizona premiere and the Southwest premiere of a show like Hamilton, which will be having its third return with us next summer. But to be able to do those kinds of things, and then also our ASU Symphony. And for those of you who have been at the Symphony this fall, when we had the mariachi group come and play with our symphony orchestra and have members of the Mexican embassy and a number of other folks to come. And it's really been a great place where one-of-a-kind things happen. There's Marcel Marceau, the Preservation Hall Jazz Band, and artists all over the world will say to me, I played Gammage.
Wow.
I remember when I was at Gammage, and for a very long time, we have a space named after Clyde, who is our TD, who we have a picture of Clyde, and he's actually building a set in Gammage, but it looks like he's building Gammage, Clyde Parker. And we have a place called Parker's Place. And people still say, how's Clyde Parker? This was several years ago. And I said, oh, he's still there. He's still working. He's no longer with us now. But Clyde was a fixture, and every artist and every company that came through know and remember Clyde. And we have an indelible memory of Clyde as he left. And when you think about ASU and ASU employees, he left his estate gift to Gammage so that work could happen, so that we could still educate tech and crew people. Many people don't know we do probably the most work that involves rigging and rigging systems. So almost everyone in the Valley who is a crew person and is trained on rigging trains with us.
Wow.
Yeah, and then they go and join a union after that.
Wow.
But, yeah, so it's pretty neat. It's pretty spectacular. And we've had so many artists that were ASU students that did their first shot at a performance on Gammage. And in fact, when Les Mis will be here in December, Nick Cartel, who is an ASU alum, is playing Jean Valjean and has done 3 national tours. And Cameron McIntosh, the British producer of Les Mis, says Nick is the best Cameron. Best Cameron, excuse me. Nick might like that. I could be Cameron McIntosh. No, is the best Jean Valjean.
Wow.
And we've had so many. Christina Alabato, who is a Broadway actress who's performed in so many shows, was a freshman and used to watch shows from Gammage and from the balcony. And she would say, I'm going to be on the Gammage stage one day. And she indeed came with Evita, and she played the mistress in that role. So there are so many wonderful memories. And one of our favorites is Gus Farwell, who's an ASU football player, who, when you go to football games and you hear "Go Devils," that's
Right.
Gus, who is an opera singer in Spain.
Wow.
And we had Gus come out, and we did a huge thing with the orchestra, and then a big thing at the stadium around the football thing. But Gus said to me, I used to sneak into Gammage
Oh,
when I was
wow.
a student and sing on the stage. And I went, I'm not sure I want to hear that, but yay, So
Right.
there are just some really amazing memories that people have. One of our secretaries of state proposed to his wife
Oh, wow.
at Gammage. So people have their own Gammage memories, and people are
Right.
always telling me stories that make me very happy. Or my grandmother took me to my first show at Gammage, or I was a student and I'd never been to the theater before, and now I'm an avid theater goer. I mean, it's pretty special. It's a pretty special place. This
It is
Harlem,
absolutely.
I'm going to say something about this Harlem Nutcracker on the side.
Yeah.
This was a world premiere, and Donald Byrd directed this. And Sunday morning, CBS came out and filmed it because it was being done to the Duke Ellington score. That he transposed the Tchaikovsky score, and we auditioned lots of little kids across the valley to be in this Nutcracker. And one of them, I have to think about Anthony's last name. Michelle, you have to say it louder. It's great. She's across the way just yelling at me. But Anthony Spalding came, and he was a little teeny tiny 10-year-old. He then went on to be a principal at the San Francisco Ballet.
Wow.
And then went to dance with the Dance Theater of Harlem in New York. And so he got his dance start on the Gammage stage as a little guy in the Harlem Nutcracker. So there are just a lot of memories.
So many stories. Yeah.
So many stories. And this program, South No Borders, this is a really, again, we are so innovative as a university. When I came, there was not a lot of culturally diverse work being done in our theaters. This was one of the shows we started called South No Borders, and we brought in artists from Mexico and South America and Central America. And as a result, that work took off.
Wow.
So there's a lot more of that work that's being done, but it wasn't being done before. We brought in telenovela stars. They were just, it was so wonderful. And we had a series of South No Borders. We did Israeli independence celebrations. We did a whole series of Israeli Independence Day is in May, but we managed to celebrate a lot of different cultures. And then we did Asia, Arizona in the arts. We have 14 different Asian communities here. We had the first indigenous gathering of peoples from around the world. We brought over a group from Darwin, and we worked with the Pima Maricopa community, Indian community, to make that happen. And it's just been really exciting to see things sort of take flight and other things happen. Working with Larissa Fasthorse, who is the first Native American woman to be a playwright presented on Broadway in her Thanksgiving play. She came and did a piece with us called Native Nations through Gammage. And as a result, it helped lead to her Pulitzer.
Wow.
Which everybody gets one of those, then which led to her Broadway work, which has come full circle, and now she's a professor with us.
Oh, wow.
To a professorship with us. So there's a lot to be proud of.
Yes.
That has happened as a result of Gammage.
Right. Absolutely. So unfortunately our time is running out, but
no, we barely scratched the surface.
I do want to talk a little bit about just the legacy of the building, right? And I want to go back to the dedication and all of those speeches. And there was something in Olga Vanna Wright's speech that I want to read, and then we can talk about the significance of it. So this is what she said. She says, "Perhaps I would correct a little bit of O.D. Miller, who was a previous speaker's words, when he said that this building will be significant in decades to come. I would say centuries to come. If this building is maintained, it will remain forever young, as my husband was forever young and as Grady Gammage was forever young, because they had the spirit of adventure in them. This building was an adventure. This building was a complete deviation from uniformity to the degree that it almost drew criticism, which may have prevented it from being built. But you see a great idea, a human heart, a will to receive something of beauty, of significance, of meaning to life won over it. So it's a great quote, so much in there. And her words speak to kind of a timelessness of the building, which is appropriate as we look at the 60th or an upcoming 60th anniversary next year. So what do you envision for the future of Gammage, the next 60 or 100 years from now?
You know, what's so exciting, and that's, you know, she was prescient to know this and know this would happen. And remind me, I'm going to come back to the exterior of Gammage before we finish, but I see us doing more work as it pertains to technology. So one of the things we've had during this time was to also make sure that that Wi-Fi and all of that was throughout the building and was there for everyone to use and for artists to use, but also technology. So we used to, you know, change lights. So you would get the big scaffolding, the cherry picker, and you would change a light bulb and you would do that. Do you know, like, while some of that work is done this way, a lot of it now, light changes are done on an iPad.
Wow.
Same thing with sound and sets coming in and out. So, you know, that's made a difference. I see us doing more of that and helping artists to figure out. The other thing Gammage has been a home to is artists experimenting with new ideas and saying, could we come like this opera that we have coming up, The Old Man in the Sea? There are 4 pools of water on it. It is a contemporary opera. And so that was like, oh, who would do that?
Right.
You know, how would that happen? We have experimented with how we utilize the space. So you can't see it from the picture behind me, but again, the wall, when you go into the box office side, which houses, and that's an older picture, which houses the orchestral shell, when we have the shell out, we actually do performances in that space. We actually had an artist come and say, what I want to do is work on this video where I'm walking the length of Manhattan and do a show in there, and then we'll have bleachers built on the outside so people can look in there and work. It was great. Who would have thought about that? Who would have thought about that? So I think we will have artists experimenting. It will always be a home for our ASU orchestra and our choral union, and be able to have young people. Like, we do a show which will bring tears to your eyes, and it's called Disney Musicals in the Schools. And we have been working with Disney, and it's for it's 2nd grade through 5th grade. And they are trained by Disney professionals and teachers to learn how to do musicals, and then they perform them on the stage. And, you know, all of the parents come, and it's just a joyous moment. Our High School Musical Theater Awards, which we have been doing now, I think we've had 6. All of our folks, none of them have ever won the big national award. All of them are working. So Casey Likes, who's starring in Back to the Future, got his first Broadway break from being on the Gammage stage to, who at 17 years old, being cast in Almost Famous and performing on Broadway.
Wow.
You know, so I think those kinds of things will happen. We look at becoming more and more sustainable. I am on the board of the Broadway Green Alliance, and we look at Broadway and the road being sustainable. So we will see things like, I've talked about the water fountains. We look at paper that has soluble ink on it, but ultimately we'll look at more and more digital. You'll be able to get the program there. We're putting in a brand new system called GalaPro. And what it means, if you are hearing impaired or have any hearing issues, you will get on a screen on your cell phone all of what's happening on the screen. So what's happening on the stage. So more of those things will happen. I love the comment that says these photos are amazing. They are amazing. When you look at that and see there was no solar paneling, which is now in that middle area of the Gammage Parkway. that isn't there. You don't see any high, look at the houses around there.
Right.
It's a very different place. So
Yeah.
so I see we'll be doing some of those things as well. We've made, again, like, look at this.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite photos. It's an
This is
aerial view, right?
amazing. No museum,
Mhm.
no Galvin Playhouse. All of these houses are kind of bungalow style houses, none of the bigger houses we see there now. The Gammage curve is still true, which is great, but now we have a trolley that runs
Right.
along the Gammage curve. You see the football field over there, but there's no Sun Devil Fitness Center. I mean, you
Right.
just see how much things have changed, and Gammage, appears to be the head of the bow of the ship
Exactly.
as we are moving.
Right.
And so,
Those
yes,
welcome arms. Yeah.
yes, with outstretched arms that say welcome. So I think we will see more use of technology. We'll see as the art forms changes, knock on wood, however long I may be here, I hope Broadway is still a big thing because we are financially independent, and that is a large source of our finances,
Right.
our Broadway. Also, the exterior of the building, you can see in the background behind me, that is a rose quartz applique. Okay, do you know what that means? We do not get to paint it. We get to find the one person who currently, I think, lives in New Orleans, who knows how to apply rose quartz and stick it on the building.
Wow.
Mr. Wright did some great things, but there were some other things, like if you thought about the care and feeding of this building, that may not be the exact way. One little note for people to know is we begin at the beginning of the orchestra and recover those seats, work our way up to the grand tier and to the balcony, and then we start again.
Wow.
There's no stopping. And
Mhm.
that's hundreds of thousands of dollars. So
Sure.
that, those kinds of things to keep the building fresh and beautiful, which is exciting,
Yeah.
which I think is very exciting.
Absolutely.
I
I
mean,
want to
it's
make
an
sure.
honor and a treasure. Is there a question or two?
Yeah, I would just want to make sure that we have time for questions. Before we do that, though, I just want to thank you for being part of this conversation. I so appreciated your insights, stories. Everything is making this building come alive for all of us, right? And to me, it reiterates my role as the keeper
Yes.
and protector and preserver of that history. Just reminding me that it is all the more important for the next 60 and 100 years and things. So
Absolutely. And Shannon, I want to thank you, and I want to thank Kaylin and Patricia and Marilyn for inviting me to do this. Gammage is very near and dear to my heart. So you are the protector of archives. I am the keeper of the temple. And I often speak to young people from kindergarten through high school, and I say, I am the current keeper of the temple. I am just holding this seat warm for one of you. For
right.
one of you to grow up and come and love Gammage as much as I love Gammage, and fight for Gammage, because there have been some discussions about changes, and there's always I'm always at the forefront of leading those. And I would also say I'm really also grateful to Grady Gammage Jr., who is not only the namesake of our president, but also very active in the Historical Society and wanting to keep Gammage. Isn't that a beautiful? It's so beautiful. But to keep Gammage alive and vibrant and a place that everyone can call its home.
Yeah, we do have a few questions. One of the first ones I see here is, are all of the photos shown from ASU archives? And yes, they are. All the photos, the covers to the programs, all of that is from our University Archives collections. A lot of it has been digitized and is up online on what we call our PRISM digital repository. And I think they're going to put some links in the chat for that to those. If not, you can just email me and I will connect you with a lot of those sources. And to be honest, what we have online, what we digitized, just scratching the surface. There's a lot of resources, so it's so much more. So let's see, another question.
I did love knowing that the Chop Shop has a beautiful picture of Gammage. I'm going to look for it, because usually I'm just there ordering my sandwich. So thank you, Patty, to know that the Chop Shop has a beautiful picture.
I'll have to look at that too. Let's see. Other questions, Kaylin or Patty? Am I missing any questions? There's a lot of great comments in here. Other people sharing their experiences and sharing their own histories.
One of the questions, Shannon, is what was the most difficult show or performance that happened at Gammage? Technically difficult.
Well, I will tell you, because there's a comment in here about the backstage area. One of the things that Mr. Wright didn't understand was you can't load a semi into a curved loading dock.
Oh, right.
So everything has to be double loaded, unloaded, and double loaded. So not to mention that cost aside, but when we were bringing in the helicopter for Miss Saigon, when the garage door goes up, there is a retaining column that's like right there, right next to the garage. And so we have 2 inches to get that helicopter in. And every single time it's like, oh my gosh, we couldn't get it in. And so there wasn't a lot of thought about that. I mean, it's also true when we have dignitaries who have a lot of high security, you know, they don't want to be caught in a round, you know, a round curved loading dock space to get someone out really quickly. So I would say that that helicopter from Miss Saigon is one of those things. Otherwise, my crew can do anything. We did a show with 80 tons of sand. This show here will have 4 pools of water, a lot of water on it. We're able to make various changes, but to get Phantom, the beams in the ceiling were not capable of holding it. So we had to reinforce the I-beams and to the tune of $750,000.
Wow.
And if you look up, you're sitting in the front row and you'll see like there's a little hole up there, and that's where the wire comes to, you know, bring out the chandelier. So we've had to make changes like that to accommodate shows, but then they wind up serving us well for other things as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. Wow.
And people do love the space.
Oh,
and
absolutely.
I love seeing children in the space. So we see over 35,000 school kids, and often we are their first and maybe only arts experience when we bring them in our performances for youth, our Molly Blank performances for youth.
Wow.
So, yeah.
What a great experience for them. I bet they love it. So
they do.
I see another question here. It's for me particular. Do you know what is the most documented building in University Archives? I would probably say Old Main, because it's one of the oldest, right? It's been around the longest. We have a lot of many photographs and a lot of documentation about Old Main. It's a near and dear building on campus. So people are very fond of that. So, and
I will say, connecting Gammage and Old Main, Teddy Roosevelt stood on the steps of Old Main, and he was a seated president doing that. The next seated president that came to the ASU campus was President Clinton, and he stood on the arms and unveiled the Bridge to the Future.
Wow.
So Teddy Roosevelt, President Clinton. That's a long time. Since then, you know, we've had some others come, but that was like the stretch. Yeah. And I love Old Main.
I know Old Main is a treasure. Yeah, it's a treasure. So yeah. Other questions, Patty or Kaylin? Am I missing anything? Thank you, Marilyn, for sharing the links.
And I would invite everyone, if you haven't come to Gammage, come to Gammage. We do tours, so you can sign up for a tour. Please come to a performance. Please come to our ASU University Symphony performance, our Choral Union performance, the organ performances, obviously our Broadway performances. We would just love to have you here. It's your building. It's yours.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for that. That's a great way to end with that, being just that welcome. And again, I just thank you so much for this time together. It's been so fun to talk about the history. We can probably do it for every building on campus, but this one is truly special. So thank you for your time.
Thank you, Shannon, so much. You were a great interviewer.
Huge thanks to Shannon and Colleen for bringing their expertise and energy to today's community conversation. And we'd also like to thank everyone for attending today. You'll be receiving a post-event survey, so please just take a moment to fill this out and let us know what other areas of ASU Library you're interested in. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, everyone.
Thank you.